out of his mind. So we forget all this. We always say, well, didn't you know? Well, it's okay, little Johnny, to be pumped
Yeah.
full of pills. It's okay, little Janie, to be pumped full of pills. Didn't you know that Einstein was a terrible student? Well, what they forget to tell you is that the problem that with a phone and what a phone does now is it robs you of the exact thing that allowed Einstein to come up with what he came up with, because he was so bored out of his mind. He was staring at a clock and just wondering, like, what the hell would happen if I could actually travel faster than the speed of light on this pencil. And he saw the clock going backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it all started, man.
It just all clicked.
Yep.
I wonder how much of that was actually him discovering it, or better yet, what if he was remembering it?
So to educate means to bring out from within. So yes, he was remembering it. But higher truth has to be discovered, because we have to realize that we've already been there. Because if we really are in the image of God, we just went really deep, bro. We just went real deep. We probably left some people, if they're following this, in the dust there. But that's kind of the whole point. Ultimately, we're going to get to that place where, like, there is no boundary.
Yeah.
Right. The fact that you and I interacted together, well, that's because we're the same, man.
Yeah.
If I have deep alcoholism in my family as well. And if I was born in your shoes, well, you know what? My name would be Keyvani.
Yeah. I mean, it's just something that's so ever present. You get so many people out there that are really, and they're turning to things, there's a chemical for everything. And then you see, well, the latest studies with the antidepressants and everything, that for years people have been trying to, Prozac was a thing going clear back to even my junior high years.
Yeah.
They were just liberally giving. I remember.
Well, because it's easier to point the finger at somebody else, right?
Oh, yeah.
Take it that. And so, with you had a point, so go ahead and finish your point, because I don't want to derail you too much. But I'd really like to hear a little bit more about. Was there like a coming of age that brought you to Bernie, and then from Bernie that then kind of left you wanting, and then from there, like, what picked you up? Because certainly anarchy isn't really where I see you now. Like, I can understand, like, that's your politics now, just because you don't really know where you fit in. But I don't really see, like, I don't see, like, this whole destruction and wasteland anarchy.
That's not the anarchy that I represent. I'm more in the mold of like a Chomsky kind of an anarchist and such like that. Anarchy itself is kind of much like socialism. It's been a term that's, I think, been abused and such. What I mean by anarchy is decentralization.
I like that.
I think it works well because spirituality itself is also a very decentralized process, focusing more on the individual, the inner experience, versus looking at some exoteric thing, whether it's, the church that will save you, or the cross, or,
well, what better way to keep sheep in a pen?
Exactly.
Say, hey, didn't you know that you're a sinner, so you belong in this jail? And then two, just wait for your savior, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead and give all your rights over to the shepherd.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And then go ahead and sit there. Go ahead and sit and wait. And it'll come. It'll come. Here we are 2,000 years later, and it's still coming.
It's still coming. It's still coming. And I think people, I think Sakharu, in that interview with Rogan, and that was where I really first discovered him. And when he said, heaven is collapsing for people, and it's kind of on the same vein of what,
but then why that was a good thing? Because at first I was like, oh my God, is that bad? But I was like, oh, I loved and how poetic, how he responded with that. And if you remember, can you kind of maybe elaborate on that?
Yeah, he said what he stated is that the reason why, he said, like 40 years ago or 50 years ago, if you were to go to a college campus and ask how many people want to go to heaven, well, obviously, like maybe 8 out of 10 people would raise their hands and such. And then something on the lines of, if you were to go today and ask the same question, well, he'd be greeted with a lot of, giggles and people not taking him seriously.
Yeah, is this guy even serious? Yeah.
And he says, the concept of heaven, it's a couple different things. First of all, you need to update heaven. He says kids nowadays, he made the joke, unless it has Wi-Fi, they have no interest in wanting to go there, And another thing is, he kind of, the whole ripping on the thing, like, what are you going to do with 72 virgins if you don't have a body? something like that, or you're going to spend your whole time on a cloud with a car,
Right.
really,
So
for
you're
all
like
eternity?
this light, this beam of light, and you've got 72 virgins of 72 virgin beams of light.
Yeah, yeah, so like heaven, yeah, okay, it probably needs an update from the 1600s at least, or something, if you're going to make it more appealing to people. But other than that, it's a great thing that it's all collapsing, because the only life that is important is the life that you're living right now,
Mm.
not the next other. Are you familiar with who Osho is?
Osho?
Osho. You seen Wild Wild Country, the Netflix special?
I'm sure I've heard of it, but yeah, I don't watch a whole lot of Netflix stuff. I've really, dude, I've been balls deep in my spiritual path for the last like 5 months and pretty much blocked nearly everything out that I don't just kind of normally consume.
Well, Osho, he was at one time known as Rajneesh, and there was a Rajneesh movement of people wanting to build like a commune up in Oregon, and that's what
Okay.
the documentary series is about. That's a whole other issue, but he was like the Sadhguru of our parents' generation.
Mm.
And for a lot of the baby boomers and such, he was kind of like the spiritual guru, and he was very revolutionary. He was known as the most controversial guru because he kind of embraced sexuality instead of like shunning it, which at the time, the baby boomers and all of that, you can't talk about sex, you can't enjoy sex, you can't, none of that. He was kind of the one that called himself a spiritual playboy. Anyway, that aside, one of his, and he said, I was against giving 10 commandments because he says he's against religion. But he said one of his favorite commandments, if he were to give anyone to anybody, would be, there is no other God other than life itself.
Hmm.
And I love that. The mere existence itself, that is God.
Well, and that mirrors a Taoist philosophy of just the eternal now.
Exactly. It's a very Buddhist concept too. It's like, it doesn't really matter. We're not saying that there isn't, but the only thing that really matters to you is your own liberation.
Well, and then what's beautiful about that is that, unpacking that a little bit more, liberation comes from darkness, man. It has to be discovered. Well,
Mm-hmm.
that's Tao. Tao is all about that. That's where everything was born, right? In fact, before the, cosmos was brought into existence, right, there was just a perfect nothingness.
Yeah.
Well, and then what we see holding all the galaxies together is a perfect nothingness that we have no idea how to measure. We know it's there. We don't know how to influence. We can see it. We know it permeates us. Well, that's the Tao, man.
Yeah.
And dark matter.
It's the
Dark.
Tao. It's the Tao. It's what some other cultures would describe as Shiva, that which is not.
Yeah.
And then Shakti, the female version of Shiva, is that which is. And so there's that primordial emptiness, and then that energy that springs forth out of it. That's within each of us.
And so, do you see a common theme in kind of that awareness of where you are now, with where you started, with kind of like there was something that led you to Bernie? It was probably like, hey, I want to help, but kind of like
I
in the
think I
way.
was caught up at the moment, the zeitgeist of the moment. I saw how a lot of my friends who at the time had, obviously I was very much a Politico at the time. I was very much in the, even prior to Bernie, I was very much an Obama guy. I helped.
You start helping by figuring out who you oppose.
Exactly. I mean, my political activism started back circa 2003 because I was very against the Iraq war, and I got involved a lot that way. It was with the Howard Dean movement. So
Nice.
from
I
that.
was in the Iraq war, so that's awesome.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it just feels crazy that it's like 20 years ago now, because it's just like, for me, it was just feels like, the Green Day album came out.
Dude, I know, man. Dude, 8 days. Dude, 8 days before September 11th. Or sorry, 8 days before I deployed to my first war zone. September 11th happened, man. It's like, what the fuck? Like, we
Yeah.
had all of our shots, we're ready to go. Like, yeah, we're going to Kosovo, right? And like, what do I know about a Muslim nation? I didn't even look up, other than that they spoke a different language. I didn't give a shit. But all of a sudden, I'm supposed to be immediately afraid. Well, wait a minute. Go
And
to a Muslim
ironically,
nation.
and there's a correlation there with what happened with COVID, because COVID is another part of that whole evolution for me recently, other than the whole
Okay, so do you think that you would have seen what, and we'll get to that evolution in a little bit, but do you think that you would be able to connect the dots that you're connecting now without first getting to Bernie? And the reason why I keep kind of harping on this, because so many people be like, yeah, Bernie, fuck Bernie. And like, I kind of feel that way in my heart a little bit because, I have a little boy who's also a little bit, who's left wanting, who wanted to see the establishment burned to the fucking ground. You're fucking right, I did. But at the same time, he led me to exactly where I needed to be, man.
And that's always the way to look at it. I personally, I don't dislike Bernie. I get where he's coming from, but at the same time, I don't think he is the leader for the moment.
I agree.
I don't think he wants to be the leader.
He doesn't. He even says, like, that's why he keeps saying, "Not me, you."
He told one of my somebody who's one of the people who's responsible for my secular awakening is Christopher Hedges, also happens to be a Presbyterian minister.
Yeah.
And he said that in one of his interviews there with Bernie, this is shortly after the WikiLeaks, dump, and when we found out all the revelations behind the Clinton campaign and the DNC and all of that Bernie said, you can really fight this. He says, hey, I don't want to turn into the next Ralph Nader.
Yeah.
Well, okay, well, maybe we need another Ralph Nader. What's wrong with Ralph Nader? And maybe he wants it because he likes his Senate access. He's got a Senate seat. So if they were to go ahead and take away his, assignment committees and all of that, but at the same time, that's the calling you take. I mean, what?
Oh yeah. Well, have you ever seen a Nikolai Tesla before and after picture?
Oh, I've seen the after pictures.
Nikola Tesla. Yeah. And just how like playboyish he looks like before and after he's gaunt. He was starved, penniless. Yeah. Every little thing that he tried to give, was that from him, right? Because I believe it was JP Morgan he was working with.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, well, hey, that's cool that you have this free energy. So how do we actually go ahead and meter it? So we can charge these motherfuckers and make some paper money. Well, he's like, what?
Yeah.
What a low vibration you come from. And they're like, oh, well, let me show you how low this goes. And they basically just, strangled him and strangled out his resources and didn't allow, and every single bit. I mean, the guy through like 300 years before, like hundreds of years before, he created a cell phone. It was like, maybe 200 years before, figured out what a cell phone was, knew that we are going to have it in our breast pocket, just something tiny, a supercomputer, figured out the way to
0
energy. Right, the Tesla coil, right? I mean, we have the most brilliant scientist alive right now, likely Elon Musk, right? Named his and consequently, yeah, maybe he's a douchebag, maybe he's not, but he's also giving all of his patents away for anyone else to recreate. Mm-hmm. And so that sounds like a greater good. Mm-hmm. And so this is something that I like. And so that also kind of helped me. And what I liked about Bernie is that he was grumpy as fuck.
Like, I love that he is disgruntled like that. And
take me as
I just wish that he would have kind of kept it up. He was kind of, that was my frustration is that he kind of was too willing to give up too easy. And in the process, he kind of turned.
Then that you can only have teeth when it comes to the Republicans. But when there's the Democrats, he can kind of get there. But the thing is he doesn't want to be floating around in the Hudson River, man.
No, he doesn't. And, he doesn't want to lose his Senate seat. I mean, I think that's basically what it comes down to. And that's what he means by he doesn't want to turn into the next Ralph Nader.
That's exactly what he means. He doesn't want to be ostracized. He doesn't want to be ridden
out. He likes being one of the inside people, but he's not. Yeah. That's the irony of the whole thing, is they'll keep him at bay. They'll keep him close enough. The same way they, manipulate the gang and the squad or whatever they call it. AOC,
whatever the fuck they are now.
Yeah. They basically have rendered them a joke, especially AFC, who's just nothing more than a celebrity these days. I mean, what has she done of anything worth of value other than just go attend a gala? And everything that they all double down on is always catering to this cultural identity, which is the only thing. Even on the right, that's what they do. When they
come to mention that, I don't believe that you introduced yourself with your pronouns. So I might actually have to let a motherfucker know, man. Somebody better be canceling Nate.
Just,
Yeah.
just in case anybody's curious, it's he, him.
I could give a shit less, man.
I don't care.
There's something so liberating about that. And in fact, what's interesting is that, in my spiritual awakening, right? So
Yeah.
I met Bernie. In fact, I actually, I ended up volunteering for Bernie. I ended up getting his notes because he came, yeah, man, he came here. Like, I got his freaking notes because I was working with people behind the scenes, and like they knew how much I loved Bernie and how much of a diehard I was, and even though they didn't necessarily like how vociferous I was about it, they really they could see the beauty there. And that's what's
Yeah.
really interesting is that if you think that, not you, Nate, but you as in proverbial, ether, you, that what we see is actually what's happening, well, then we are in for a rude awakening. Because often people who are the nicest to you aren't the loudest.
No.
The people who give you the hug when you need it are the people who show up when you need it. And the people who are there the loudest are just to tell you why you're an asshole. Like, what, man? I don't fucking need any more reason to tell me why I'm an asshole. Like,
All I wanted to do